I'm an art writer. That's my chief love. I write for Art in America magazine, but also many other publications in the US and abroad. Additionally, I'm curating exhibitions. I've curated quite a few, freelance curator, once again in the US, but in many other countries. And also, I'm a professor in the School of the Arts at Virginia Commonwealth University in Richmond, Virginia, in the US, which is a really wonderful art academy. That's what I do. My interest in visual arts came from two primary reasons and three reasons, but that's a little complicated. In upstate New York, I grew up in an amusement park. I was a carny. Belonged to my circa Coney Island 19-teens amusement park with a big Ferris wheel like you find in Helsinki. And working there, it was not all just wonderful and fabulous. It was gritty and tough, but I experienced the transformative visual and sonic power of an amusement park on a little pretty poor town. At night, when the amusement park was packed and shining and the Ferris wheel was going around and all the lights were blazing, I absorbed the transformational power of a visual force. And later in New York City, I was a poetry secretary, if you believe that, for a very good poet who is also, his name is Stanley Moss, and he's also happens to be a world-class private dealer in old master paintings. So I worked with him in his mansion in Riverdale on Hudson, New York, and occasionally he would be on the intercom saying like, "Gregory, bring me the El Greco exfolio." And I would like walk with shaking hands up the marble staircase holding an actual El Greco. And there I could also just spend half an hour staring at a Caravaggio or the Bellinis and this kind of stuff. And so that made me avid for visual art. And then I began to meet contemporary artists in New York City, especially in Brooklyn. And although I did not know much, those artists suffered my interests and enthusiasm and welcomed me. So my education was very much an education of the streets, of studios, of works in progress, driven by absolute powerful interest and enthusiasm. And from all of that, somehow I began writing about contemporary art. Contemporary art is a niche enterprise in a culture. Like at any given moment, not all that much or that many people of a culture will be deeply concerned with contemporary art, but that's, as David Byrne and the Talking Heads said, that's the same as it ever was. So just understand that. No problem. Once again, artists are renovating forces, and sometimes it takes a while for a culture to catch up with what they're doing. What can greatly help is artists themselves coming together, establishing communities where you can really talk shop and talk interest. I think it's important for artists really from anywhere to understand that art really isn't a local enterprise anymore these days. So artists of Helsinki or Brooklyn or Reykjavik or anywhere it's a very good idea to have a bigger perspective and be paying attention to art from elsewhere. And then I have to say it's a great thing if there is economic and governmental support for the arts, and governments by and large and cultural organizations should understand how important and how nutritious contemporary art is indeed for a culture altogether, because artists are often the ones dealing with complex matters in driving, fascinating ways that actually offer considerable assistance for a culture at large. So it's a great use of resources and energy and for really any, I'm not just speaking about Finland, but really anywhere for society to, in some measure, honor and support the artists and the musicians and the artists broadly understood in their midst. There's two huge things, fundamental things that have happened in the arts during my years of involvement, 20 or 25 years so far. First is the rise of an international perspective. This is crucial and this is great. The second and the most important, in my opinion, the single most important thing in visual arts is the rise of women. In the arts, an unprecedented unprecedented occurrence in the history of Western art, and I think that also greatly informs my perspective. I'm very conscious of seeking out wonderful work by women around the world because I know that this is the most important thing that's happening now. What I'm looking for oftentimes is not just works that are wonderful and great to look at and smart and everything like that, but that are transformational, that really affect one's psyche and soul and help you to live better and are nutritious. Richard Tuttle, a great American post-minimal sculptor, has in an interview recently released on the Louisiana, Denmark channel, from the internet channel from the Louisiana Museum, has spoken of art as food for the soul, and this is one of the great sculptors of the era, and I really agree with him. So that's the inspiration. Also, many other things. What is much inspiring for me is to, while I'm a New York-based writer, I believe in in paying attention to the wide world when it comes to art. So I want to be extremely democratic and open to art around the world. And then another thing is nature. And I'm a hiker and a backcountry person, and I love going deep into the mountains and the wilderness, especially with my 13-year-old son, Maximilian. My impressions of the Finnish, I wouldn't want to speak for the Finnish art world because I don't have enough knowledge, but I'm learning and I'm interested and engaged, and I've seen a lot of good work already at Emma and at SICK Gallery, artist-run gallery, which I think is excellent. Wonderful place, and then I'm very greatly impressed by the work of the graduate students that I've met already right here in this program at Aalto University. My advice to young aspiring artists is to fully inhabit your work, to live your work, and yes, establish connections with other people. Yes, meet people from not just your local scene, but the larger art world. Yes, hang out together and talk shop and really deal with things. But most important thing is to be risky, adventurous, and to fully inhabit your work and not think that you've arrived, no matter how good you are. Keep the inquiry going, keep the energy going. The great romantic writer in my country, Ralph Waldo Emerson, transcendentalist poet and philosopher, has an incredible moment in his essay, The Poet, in which he suddenly just says, art is the path of the creator to his work. If you think about that, that's incredible. Most people will think that art is the sculpture that the sculptor produces, or the photograph that the photographer produces. But Emerson, 170 years ago, was shifting things entirely to say to art is the path of the creator to his work, the focus on how the artist is thinking and living and feeling and dreaming and moving and changing. And it's important for artists, in my opinion, to dwell in freedom and in transformation, because this is a profoundly transformational questing enterprise.